Hi everybody, welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude in part 3 of the Hasegawa 148 scale F6F-3 Hellcat. Alright, just as a quick recap, I got step 1 done, everything assembled, painted. I even did this part of step 2, which was paint the inside of that and install the small windows. The instrument panel decal's been applied, so ready to move on to step 2. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out parts F3 for both sides, which is the exhaust. And again, my normal modus operandi is to demonstrate how I cut off and clean the first couple of parts and then do the rest of them off camera, unless there's something special to talk about, like if there's something I have to do a little bit different so as to maybe cut down on time a little bit, since my last video was 1 hour and 6 minutes long. So what I do is I cut them off, cut the pieces off like thusly. Oh, and as an aside, so far I really like this Hasegawa kit. First Hasegawa kit I built, and so far so good. I'm impressed. I like it. So once that's cut off, then I will get my little sanding stick here, sand the seam line down and where I cut the sprue gate off, make sure it's smoothish. Like that. And then what I need to do is I need to drill these out, since they are exhausts. So here is how I'm going to accomplish that. First, I'm going to make sure there's no seam line on there, or at least minimize it, like that. Then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to center it as best I can. You know, actually I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to use this here, which is something I use for a scriber. It's from a drawing kit, a drafting kit, and try and make, pre-punch it so the drill bit will center up a little bit better without skipping around. Okay. Then using my pin vise with a small drill bit, center it on there as good best as I can, start drilling, and then check and make sure it is pretty centered, because this is just going to be kind of a pilot hole. So I'd like to use a little bit bigger bit. I may not though, because the other one I have is like too close to the outside diameter of these. So I will just drill that like that, and at least it looks a little bit better. I may try this one here. No, I won't. It's too close, and I don't want to totally obliterate one of the sides. So I'm going to do that to all 6 of these exhaust tips. And that's what I end up with. So I did reconsider and decide to drill them out bigger, and it worked out fine. So what I did is I drilled a pilot hole with this, and then using the larger bit, bored it out a little bit more. Now I'm not going I'm not making the hole too deep because I don't want to take a chance of going a little bit crooked and basically getting it so thin that it just comes apart on the edge. But one thing you can do in a situation like this, if your hole is slightly off center, whichever side it's closest to, get your bit like it's thinner on this side than over here, then drill toward the thicker side, and then carefully finesse it straight, and it'll kind of center it up a little bit better, if that makes any sense. And since these are kind of like tucked in behind the cowling, the cowl flaps, and they're going to be darkened up with some dark paint and soot and stuff like that. It'll give a reasonable facsimile of exhaust. So the next thing is to glue them in place. So I've set that one in place right there, and then I will, whoops, gotta get going in the right direction. Put them in place, to me extra thin, and voila. I need to do that for both sides. See, looks pretty good. All right, the next thing I'm gonna take care of here is, it says to remove or open hole there and here. So this one here is, it's kind of a rectangular shaped hole, so it should be pretty easy just to cut out. Like that. Do it on the other side. Okay, so this needs to be cut out for the gun sight to fit. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I used my knife and I cut the most of it, the majority of the plastic out. It's really thin, just like in those windows. And then I'm using this file, the edge of it, whoops, wrong one, the edge of this file here that's rounded but thin, and filing it out like that, so at least it's rounded looking. Then I'll clean this up so it'll look good once it's together. All right, the next thing I need to do is get the cockpit glued into the fuselage. So the first part I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the side cleaned up and the side of the cockpit and glue this side in first, because I want to make sure that it's all lined up and solid before I try and start monkeying around with the instrument panel and the other side. So to clean that up, I'm just going to scrape paint off of the sides. Like this. That way I get a nice solid connection. So I've already got this part scraped there, so I'm going to do this part here. I should be good to go. I've already got this scraped there and there. So now it's just a matter of holding it in place, making sure everything's lined up, and applying the cement. So I'll do these parts first. Hold that while it dries, and then glue this back here onto the sides. And make sure that is seated in there good, because I don't want any alignment problems later. Okay, and doing a little test fitting here, I decided to cut the gun sight off and reinstall it, because that's what this little hole, the instructions call out for. Right here, open hole. That is for the gun sight, and it didn't line up quite right, so I think I might have misaligned it when I glued it on to the instrument panel initially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the instrument panel on the base, and then I'm going to wait and do this, glue that part once it's in place. Actually, I think I'm just going to put it together and then glue that top part. There's a lot of stuff going on here to get lined up, so there we go. That's it. All right, so I've got that there. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to glue the front part of the fuselage here first. Get that glued together. Make sure it's lined up as much as possible. Then once I get that, then I'll glue in here. So take my extra thin. Like that, like that, and like that. Squeeze it together. Make sure it's lined up pretty good. I'm going to clamp this until it dries good. And it looks pretty good as far as alignment. I'm eyeballing it up against some white paper here to make sure it looks pretty flat. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do here, this seam. Pretty much get the whole nose portion. Like that. Flip it over, make sure that's flat. That looks pretty good. All right, with that glued, next I'm going to do this strip right here. And it's going to take a little tweaking because if I just squeeze it together, it's slightly out of alignment. So I'm going to use this tape to kind of pull it, and then I'll clamp it with these. twist it a little bit. Pull the tape across. And then clamp it. Like that, and that is going to take a little bit of sanding, but no big deal. Like that. Okay, so this whole part down here is glued, so I'm just going to continue working my way around, and then once I get it all glued and in place, then I'll come back and see what I've got and see what I need to do as far as sanding any seams. Alright, so while this fuselage stuff, all that is drying, I want to make sure it's nice and the glue is nice and hard, so when I sand it, it doesn't do any gooey stuff. So while that is drying, I went ahead and cut these parts off for the engine assembly and got those primed. So now it's time to actually paint them. So what I'm going to do is the engine parts are supposed to be sprayed steel, and then this is supposed to be painted gray. So for the steel, well, I think I'll do the gray first, and I will use, since it's already pre-thinned, let's see, okay, it's neutral gray, so I'm just going to paint that kind of a medium gray. And what I'm going to use for that, since it's already pre-mixed and all I got to do is shake it up and spray it, is I think I will use gunship gray. It's kind of a darkish gray, because I think this would be a little too light. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use gunship gray, Ammo by MIG. Spray that, so it'll be real easy to spray and clean up. And then to spray steel, I'm going to use steel, Vallejo acrylic metal color. All right, now that all this is dry, I can glue it together. Peel my masking job off of here. Maybe. Wow. Tape stuck. Okay, so this goes there, and for this I'm going to use this cement because I can get it right all along the edge all the way around like that. Okay, and then for this I'm going to do the same thing. Also, I need to put some cement right there to glue these two pieces together. And there is that. So I'm going to let that dry a bit, and then I can put a decal right there. But I'll get to that directly. So now I'm going to start sanding the fuselage seams down. It's probably going to take me a little bit, so I'm not going to do this on camera, but I will just kind of demonstrate a little bit about what I'm doing. And then I'll show how I replace the panel lines along the top edge here, since they are going to get obliterated, as you can already see. It's actually quite easy, so it won't be a big deal. Got to be careful with this because there's a step there and I don't want to eliminate that. That would be a little bit harder to replace. So I'm going to work on this for a bit. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to paint these seam lines and see if I missed anything. Probably going to have to do a little bit more here, but I want to see what where I need more work to be done on the seams, if any. So mix up some black paint and do that. I think I'll use primer. Stone Rose primer. It dries really quick and it sands really well. Okay, so I got it sprayed and I do have a little bit more work to do, but I'm going to let it dry really well. And I think what the deal is using the Tamiya extra thin. I think it has a tendency to shrink a little bit if I don't get it pressed together really good. Back here it's really good, up here not so much. There's good. Along here, this is good up to here, and then I get into some gaps. So I'm going to let this dry really good, and then I'll work on sanding it down again. So in the meantime, I'm going to work on the engine some more. And what I'm going to do is the first thing I need to do is in the back of the firewall, or whatever you want to call it, there is a protruding ejector pin mark or something, and I need to scrape that down so it will fit flush and properly on here, because right now it's kind of wobbly like, and that dog ain't gonna hunt. So I'm gonna work on that a little bit, and what I'm gonna do is just use a curved blade and just scrape it down like this to where it's kind of flush with the rest of it. Okay, well, all that is sitting aside doing its thing. I'm going to go ahead and start on step 4 and get the wings glued together. So I'm going to need 2 top pieces and the bottom. Okay, so the first side here, take a look, and the fit looks really good. Everything lines up really well. Not going to have to do any tweaking as I glue on that side. So let's check this side. And what I'm going to do is I'll paint the landing gear bays after I get it together. Yep, all looks really good, so I can just start gluing this stuff up. So I'll use my usual method and just start at one side here. Make sure these holes are lined up, panel lines. just start gluing it. I like to do it in short segments that way. I can keep things lined up. To minimize cleanup. Of the seams. Okay, get some tape. Then I will just work my way around. All right, so this wing's all glued. So now I'm going to work on this one. I'm going to do basically the same thing. Start here, work myself around, and clamp it as I go. All right, so while the wings are drying, I'm working on these seams. And I've already started sanding here, and you can see that as I'm sanding, it's sanding a little bit over here and over here. It means I got a step. That's why it's kind of a good idea to prime it, or at least put a little bit of paint or something on it to see if it's smoothed out. See, there's a pretty good indentation right there. So I'm going to work on this for a little bit. Okay, so the wing is done, and so that finishes up steps 1, 2, 3, with the exception of the tail wheel and the hook. I'm going to wait till everything is done and sanded before I glue those on. But 1, 2, 3, and 4. All I have left to do on 4 is glue on these little exhausts, and I'm going to do those the same way I did the other ones in the earlier step. 2 F3s, I will drill those out and get those glued into place. Okay, so I got these drilled out, but I'm going to wait to glue them on till after I get this glued onto here and get everything all cleaned up and you know, ready to go. So I think with that, in order to keep this one from being, you know, insanely and horribly long, I'm going to end it right here with step 4. So with that ends part number 3 of the Hasegawa 148 scale F6F 3 Hellcat, to be done in FAA Mark I color scheme. So as always, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude. If you have any hints, tips, or any of that kind of stuff, put them in the comments section down below and I will get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you all later.